Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we talk about issues affecting veterans after they get out of the military. Before we get started, I'd like to ask a favor. If you haven't done so already, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. If you've already done that, thank you. These ratings help the show get discovered so it can reach a wider audience. And while you're there, click the subscribe button so that you get notified of new episodes as soon as they come out. If you don't use Apple Podcasts, you can visit driveonpodcast.com/subscribe to find other ways of subscribing, including our email list. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and now, let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, today my guest is Joey Brown. He started an organization called Another Average Joe, which is a veteran community that helps to connect veterans with resources that are out there and available for them. So welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into the military and where you've gone from there.
Hey Scott, thanks for having me. I really appreciate being on the show. So just kind of background on how I got to Another Average Joe. So I, was kind of, I think like a lot of people my age was, affected by the events of September 11th to kind of join the military. I don't come from a military family or background necessarily. So that kind of just was kind of the big driving factor in joining in the first place. And for me, I know I didn't necessarily have this preconceived notion that I was going to do 20 years or not. I just kind of said I was going to do it. And as long as I enjoyed it kind of mentality. So I went in, did Air Force RTC. And so I had actually never flown an airplane. I think this is kind of interesting. A lot of people, when they hear my background, think that's kind of funny, but I was already a cadet. And I told myself I was either going to do engineering or fly. And then I got a chance to fly on an incentive flight on a tanker and watch them refuel some fighter jets. And I said, that's what I want to do. So I kind of ended up there, ended up flying the F-15E Strike Eagle. I was a weapons systems officer, so backseater in a two-seat Strike Eagle. Did that for 7 years, just got out, coming up on a year this month, and really felt like kind of through the process of getting out, I had a pretty quick turnaround between the time I found out the date that I was going to separate and getting out. So I worked really hard. I took advantage of some great programs, the DoD Skill Bridge being one of them. For readers that don't know, there's more information that I can talk to them about it. More than happy to. And it really kind of set me up for success. But with the timing of me getting out in March of 2020, COVID hitting, having a stable job and everything kind of worked out, I realized, it could have gone differently. And so I wanted to try to help veterans just kind of get to that point. So I started September of last year, I started a blog called Another Average Joe and kind of started to tell my story. And then where I want to take it from there is the community aspect, because I feel like that's what a lot of veterans miss when they get out. It's just the camaraderie that they had when they were in. And that's kind of the quick intro of where Another Average Joe came from. And I used the name. I didn't want it to be like, I kind of want to be service agnostic, right? I wanted to encompass all veterans from all backgrounds. It worked well with my name being Joey, but hey, I'm just an average Joe, and if I did it, you can do it too, kind of mentality. So,
right, yeah, and I like where this is heading too. It seems like you're trying to get more of the community aspect of it, because that is something that frequently when I talk to veterans on this podcast and other places, that's frequently one of the things that they are missing, is that camaraderie, the like-minded folks that they can talk to and will understand where they're coming from, because quite frankly they've been there too, and so that's a good direction ahead. I think that's definitely something that people after getting out of the military are having trouble with, and they need that sort of community aspect of it, which I know these days is hard with COVID. It's not like you can have big group gatherings of different kind of meetings and things like that, because that's just not something that people are a lot of times willing to do or even able to do based on restrictions that are out there. But starting it up and getting it, hopefully we're over this COVID stuff in the near future,
Mhm.
and then we can get back to that, uh, meeting in person and all that kind of stuff. So you said a little bit about another average Joe, where the name came from and everything, but what is it all about? As far as like the resources and things like that. What is it, the idea behind it, and the direction that it's going in?
Yeah, certainly. So I sat down and I said I want to be able to kind of help, veterans, but I started to look at, um, I talked to a lot of different mentors about it and said, hey, a lot of them said kind of go find something specific, right? Like there's a lot of different resources out there, and it's like, hey, I went and did this when I got out. So, they kind of help people in that same background. When I started to look at it, I said, well, those kind of already exist, right? If you know where you're going to go, I always use the example like an MBA program. It seems like a lot of uh, military officers, especially, get out and go get their MBA and kind of career pivot, all that kind of stuff. There's defined paths, right? There's people that specialize in that, but I wanted to look at it and say, well, what if you don't know what you want to do, or what if you want to take a slightly less traditional path when you get out? And I wanted to kind of connect all those resources together. So that's kind of what Another Average Joe is about, right? Like I don't have a specialty in a bunch of different areas, and I never will, but I can connect you to people as I, begin to grow the network that have that opportunity. And I think on the episode where you had Lynn talked about, transitioning military, getting out is such a pivotal moment because really you can do, whatever you want. I've talked with some buddies of mine about this, and uh, you've probably seen it as well. People get so wrapped up in what they did when they were in, and they feel like, okay, I did XYZ job when I'm in, so that corresponds to XYZ job when I get out. But
Right.
especially this time, it's just really you could do anything you want. But if you don't know that opportunities are out there, you're not going to potentially take that chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've used this example before. I think I might have used it in the episode that you were talking about, which I'll link to in the show notes too for anyone who wants to go back and listen to that episode. But um, uh, I was an infantryman in the army, and there's not a whole lot of careers in the infantry field that once when you get out of the military. There's not a whole lot of door kickers, and there's some correlation to other jobs, such as police and things like that, but it's not like you can directly take the job that you did in the military necessarily, and go and do the same thing. A fighter pilot isn't going to be a fighter pilot in the civilian world. You could be a pilot of a commercial aircraft potentially, but you're not going to necessarily be a fighter pilot in the civilian world. So there are some differences there, but just because you had that one particular background doesn't mean that you can't go back to school and learn something else. You've gone through military training. You obviously are teachable. This
Mhm.
is just, in general, you're generally teachable and you can learn new things. I mean, my college degree is in accounting, and I work in IT tech. I develop software now. Like I don't even use accounting most of the time in my work, and it's definitely possible to go and pivot and learn new things, especially after getting out of the military. But the experiences that you had have definitely shaped who you are, and it could make you, if you leverage those experiences, it could make you into a much more valuable employee to employers in the future. Um, so you're absolutely right with that. You know,
Yeah, I agree. And for me, so I did the SkillBridge internship, which for anyone who doesn't know about the program, I'll give you a quick rundown. Basically, once you get within 180 days of separating, you can do an internship for a company. So you'll get paid your normal military salary, and then the company cannot legally pay you. So it's really a win-win, right? If there's a high chance of them hiring you afterwards, or if they're going to teach you some kind of skill. So I used it in an internship capacity, but they also have programs for if you're trying to do technical jobs, get like technical training for something. that will, give you a certification or whatever, that you can get approved for that as well. And so I can't say enough good things about it. I don't think enough people take advantage, realize you still have to work that through your command, chain of command. Your commander has to sign off on it to say, hey, we can let you basically, be absent the last 6 months. But I think for many people, and it doesn't have to be a full 6 months, you could, kind of work out whatever timing works. But I just don't think enough people know about it. And I think, especially kind of with the shift that I've seen in the military, I think they're more willing to let this, to approve this kind of thing.
Right.
But people have to ask and put in the work. And if you don't know about it, then you're not going to ask before you get out. So.
Yeah, and that's one of those things too, where if you don't know that the program exists, you're not going to go and ask to do that type of thing, because that just wouldn't cross your mind that would even be a possibility if you're not aware of it. So that's where I think things like what you're doing, that the kind of community that's out there with the various people and programs and things like that you can connect people with, will come in handy, because like no one person is going to know all of the things and all the resources and programs that are available. And if someone like yourself, or group of people who can refer people out to the right programs, especially when people are transitioning out, or in that 180-day window, that could be a huge benefit to people, to get them aware of the things that are out there. I know when I was when I came back from Afghanistan, I was National Guard, and when we were deployed to Afghanistan, we came back and they had this whole list of different programs and services, all sorts of things that were available to us, and it was like drinking from a fire hose, and it was just so much stuff that was coming at me, that most of it didn't stick. Like I didn't know what I had available to me, because it was just so much information, and all the little pamphlets and flyers and things like that they gave us was just so overwhelming that I didn't know what to do with it all. And there's so many different conditions, like do I even qualify for some of this stuff, and everything. It just was so cumbersome. So it's nice to have some sort of resource available that you can go and bounce these questions off of, to say, what is available for education or for career training, and that type of thing. So,
yeah. And one of my goals is to, I've talked with a lot of people about this. I'm sure you saw this getting out, but the TAP program isn't the best, and it's not necessarily the fault of the military, right? Like that's not the primary that's my opinion, right? It's not the primary purpose of the military is not to focus on the TAP program. And so I do like what they did right before I got out, where it's now mandatory a year from your separation date, as long as it's like a known separation. In my case, it was a little bit different, because I was doing what's called the Palace Chase program, where I was trying to trade active duty commitment for Guard commitment. So I was working through that paperwork, so it wasn't like a defined date until it got approved. But for most service members getting out, they know well in advance. And so I think that's a great, even if you go through TAP a year before you get out, at least it gets you, or should start to get you in the mindset of getting out. And then, there's some responsibility you have to take to go look up these resources and really kind of start this process. I know for me personally, it was like not just leaving the military, but I went through a tremendous amount of self-improvement, just kind of started listening to stuff and learning about the different things that I might want to do, because what I envisioned from the day, first day I said I wanted to get out, to what I'm doing now is totally different, but
right.
in a good way. So.
And that's okay, like to pivot too. You may go down one path and realize, hey, this isn't for me, or maybe it's just not the right time, or whatever the case may be. And it's okay to pivot and change directions as you go down. So how was that transition for you, going from active duty to the Guard? I've known a few people that I served with who were active duty, and they came into the Guard. What was that transition like for you?
I've personally really enjoyed it. I came from flying the Strike Eagle into an ASOS unit, so working with the TACP, Tactical Air Control Party. So really, different perspective, right? So I'm now, instead of talking on the radio, flying overhead and working with the guys that are doing controlling dropping ordnance. I'm working with the guys on the ground that are dropping the ordnance. So kind of a shift in the perspective, but that was what I enjoyed the most when I was in, was close air support. Trying to limit the acronyms here, but
Right. No, that's okay.
but yeah, so like just supporting the Army and supporting the guys on the ground through the Air Force. And so I really like the kind of mission of the unit, but I also like the change of pace. It's definitely not active duty, and that's what I needed at the point that I was ready to get out. So
Right, and it's there's pros and cons to both. The active duty lifestyle and the guard or the reserve lifestyle, where it's the 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year, that type of thing. Um, as you move along in your career, people tend to get married and start a family, and one tends to be a little bit better for family life and being around home with your spouse and potentially kids and things like that. So it's really a personal decision, to make that sort of change. And I think that's important for people to understand too, is, one's not better than the other. It's just, they're different. They are, the right position for you at that time. And if it makes sense that change should happen, then, you can pursue that, if the time is right for you, so. So what kind of resources and things will be available for people to look into at Another Average Joe, with the community that you're looking to build here?
Yeah, certainly. So the website is going to kind of continue to host the blog, which will I'll continue to kind of tell my story. What I would like to do is as I kind of wrap that up, I want to bring other veterans on to kind of tell their story from different services, different backgrounds, and kind of keep the blog going like that. On the resource side, what I'm looking to do is kind of have the resources kind of centralized on the website, and then the community aspect, I'm trying to build that slightly differently. So what I'm leaning towards right now is setting up a Discord server and basically allowing people to have that kind of open communication, right? So I'll set it up with some guided channels to walk you through the process from making the decision to personal resources, VA claim, whatever it is you might need. Then another section for the more professional resources, like different career options and that kind of stuff, and being able to kind of facilitate the conversations, right? Because somebody may get on there and say, hey, I'm doing this, and hopefully there's somebody else that as the network grows, it's like, hey, I did something similar, or I'm coming from your background, I can help you translate your skills better than I would. And so that's really the community aspect, right? The website is going to continue to grow as I find more resources that I can post on there. Right now, it's just resources that I personally use during my transition process, so I'm most familiar with them. But actively, I'm working with a bunch of different organizations to connect. I found a great one called Outlaws Incorporated. Partner with them, and they pretty much exclusively just try to get veterans into trade jobs. So they've got a great way they do that, and that's kind of what I imagine is bringing all of those different little organizations together that specialize in one thing, and then allowing that open communication where people can come in and just ask questions. Because a lot of times if you're just Googling, right, how do I do this, for someone leaving the military, there may be kind of like a generic checklist, but if you could talk to a person who's done it, I think that would be the easiest way. So facilitate those conversations is really the big thing for the community aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And taking after or following in the footsteps really of people who've been there and done that, that have transitioned out of the military, they started a career in a particular field. They've made all the mistakes already. They've gone down that path, and they figured things out, and they know what to do, what not to do in a particular career. So it just makes sense to pick their brain and kind of follow after them. And that's why, I've had people on from the VFW and American Legion and other organizations like that. And I think it's important for people to realize that there is a community of veterans out there, um, many of which are uh, older, but they've been in your shoes before, and they've transitioned out of the military at some point. Uh, they've um, they've moved on. They've started a career. They started their family, and they moved on, and they've lived life. Um, it does make sense to join these organizations and meet up with these people. Some of these people might be uh, 20, 30 years in an industry, and they have a lot of knowledge in that, and it may be the industry that you want to get into. So if they're willing, pick their brain, be, go there and see what you can get out of them, to chat with them and find out what would be good for your career to follow in those footsteps.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, outside of lacking the connections and the connections with the people who are maybe in the industries that they want to get to, why do you think it's so hard for veterans in particular to adjust and find a career and after their military life?
So I think, to me, it really kind of comes down to how much effort you put in during the transition. I mean, I think people kind of underestimate in some ways, how pivotal it is, right? If whatever you did when you were in, if there's a clear path that's kind of linear, to an outside job that you also enjoy, and
Mhm.
that works for you, that's great. But I think for a lot of veterans, it's not. And sometimes that, statistically, when I don't know what the statistics are, but veterans are not, as likely to stick around in their first job that they join, that they have,
Right.
And I think part of that just is because they don't, you don't know exactly what it is you want to do. You're worried about, finding a job, putting, food on the table, providing for your family, all that kind of stuff, which is important. And so that's why I encourage people to take the time when they're getting that military paycheck, right, to start thinking about it.
Right.
And it's definitely a balance, right? Whatever your mission is, whatever your job is, you still got to be there and contribute. You can't just not show up. But there needs to be, a balance and a kind of a longer, more thought out transition. So I think that is why veterans struggle, and I think a lot of people don't want to necessarily talk so openly about it. And so I think, if you can talk about it, then you can help solve the problem.
Yeah, and there's probably a little bit of the culture where it's like, oh, I can figure it out on my own. It's not, I don't need anybody else to help me figure this out. And there's really no shame, I don't think, in asking for help, especially in stuff that you maybe aren't so familiar with. Working a civilian job, for instance, is not something that a lot of people from the military, if a lot of people join right out of high school, or maybe they went to college or something and then joined after that. um, they don't have a whole lot of experience working a civilian job. So applying for a civilian job with filling out the resume and applying, how do you do the interview process, all that kind of stuff. That's just not something that is intuitive necessarily, unless you've done it a few times, and or someone has taught you how to do that. And so I think reaching out to people, finding these programs that are available is definitely a good thing to help them out in that transition.
Yeah, I agree. I'll give a good example of what you were just talking about, right? Like, imagine, all your friends, if you enlisted straight out of high school, imagine your friends, from high school, they either went on to college or they went on into the workforce, most likely. Well, they already have going through that interview process in one way or another, right? And then
Right.
if you went to college and then joined the military, well, the people that you graduated college with, they had job interviews, right? I didn't. I went to college. I went straight into the Air Force. So the first time I was ever thinking about a job interview was, a year ago, or a little more than a year ago. And I used a company called Canderful, another great example. So Canderful provides totally free virtual practice interviews, and they've got people in all different kinds of industries. And there's look them. I forget the exact kind of backstory of how they got started, but I use them as a huge resource. I have a post about it on the website talking about how it really helped me, and I used it to kind of get ready and kind of understand the process. I used it for a specific interview with a company that I didn't end up working for, but just that preparation, made me so much more prepared when I got to the company where I'm working now to do the interview, that there's no way I would have been that prepared otherwise. I could sit on my own, I could talk to other people about it, but unless you just sit down and do an interview, you've learned by doing, or I think a lot of people do in that regard.
Yeah, and when I was in college, I joined the college before I even was in the military. But one of the things that the college offered, it wasn't like a credited course or anything like that. It was a voluntary extra thing that you could do if you want. But it was a thing where you would meet with people for mock interviews. For they would give you like what the job was, and you would go in there and pretend like you were actually going in for an interview. So you actually had the experience of doing an interview before you actually went to your first interview, and they would give you feedback of how you did, how you answered the questions, and things like that. They did all sorts of things like etiquette at business dinners, and other things along those lines, how to fill out your resume, and how to make a good impression, all that kind of stuff. But it was one of those things where they understood that a lot of the people who were in school came there straight from high school. So a lot of them never were even on an interview, not for a professional job anyways. And so it really did help us as we were thinking about, in our, junior, senior year, as we were thinking about what our career was going to be like. It really did help us prepare and do our best on those interviews and everything. So, even us college kids could stand to have some coaching in that area, and there's no shame in getting some support in that area, if you're transitioning out of the military either. I think it's a great way to go. Anything else that you would add for people who might be in that 180-day window or thinking of getting out? Anything else that you would add as far as advice or resources that you might be willing to share, or other tips, things like that, for those types of people?
So, kind of looking back at my own transition and thought process, one of the mistakes that I fell into, and I talked about this with several people now, but early on I said, well, I'm just going to get out. I felt burned out at the time. I want to get out. I just want to find a job. I really don't care what it is. I remember one day our commander said, hey, if you just want to go make widgets in a widget factory, you shouldn't be in the military. And I was just like, yeah, that sounds great. I don't care. And that's not the right attitude to have. I think that is potentially another reason that people, have struggled to find a job that they, gives them meaning, because they look at it as, okay, I did whatever it is when I was in, I just want a job when I get out. I think to kind of make that successful transition, you have to find what is going to be next for you, and I can't answer that for you. You can't answer that for other people, right? It's something you kind of have to find yourself, but what kinds of things will be meaningful to you? And then that should guide you in the direction of whatever kind of career or job path you're looking into.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great advice. That's something you got to do some soul searching for, and dig down deep, and figure out what it is that you want to do. Um, well, with that, looks like we're kind of good time to wrap this up. So it has been a pleasure speaking with you, and finding out about everything that you've been up to. Where can people go to get in touch with you and find out more about Another Average Joe?
Yeah, certainly. So you can check out the website, anotheraveragejoe.com, or on Instagram at _ABG_Joe. That's where I'm most active on Instagram. I've also got LinkedIn and Facebook. They're both called Another Average Joe, A Veteran's Story, if you look them up on there. And then feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn as well.
Okay. Perfect. And I will have links to all of those, your social media and your website, all of that in the show notes, so everyone can find it there. And again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Scott.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com, or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Drive On Podcast.